Listen guys, being in a gang is cool. All children should aspire to be like their heroes who end up dead or in prison. And there are two types of prisoners, ones who drop the soap and others who are looking for people to drop the soap. There are a lot of gang members in prison. Gang members are more likely to commit crimes, and crime is crime. If you're willing to risk prison, you're willing to risk prison. If you don't believe me, take MS-13. Their slogan is kill, rape, and control. Now, how did this gang start? Well, during the 70s, there was a rise of left-wing insurgency in El Salvador. Starting off as a protest for election fraud, security would open fire, killing over 1,000 civilians. By the time it was the 80s, there was a civil war between the government and the communist revolutionaries. The communists were being supported by the Russians and Cubans, while the government was being supported by the US. So El Salvador was a war zone for over 10 years. Obviously, hundreds of thousands of Salvadorians settled in Southern California, where they were targeted by gangs such as the Latin Kings, 18th Street, and Norteños. The Salvadorian immigrants created MS-13 to protect themselves, and gradually they became another violent street gang. In 1992, when the El Salvador Civil War ended, the US started deporting Salvadorians because they were no longer refugees, especially criminals, and it was mostly men who got deported. Now, how do you join the gang? It's really easy. You get beat in, not to get confused with getting beat off. According to this anecdote on Reddit, they beat you really badly, possibly to the point where you're quadriplegic. Or you can kill somebody to get into the gang. Infanticide, where you kill infants, or femicide, where you kill women, are pretty common. El Salvador has the third highest femicide rate in the world. In 2016, only 5% of these murders led to conviction. And I guess women can join too. Their initiation is different. They have to bang 13 members of MS-13. You might see VM put a wig on pretty soon and try to join. In El Salvador, MS-13 extorts local business, bus drivers, shops. They rob people at gunpoint, rape, sex traffic, and sometimes they jaywalk. For sex trafficking, they target foreigners from neighboring countries, deported migrants, and children. Their rivals are the 18th Street Gang, who also originated in the US. El Salvador used to have the highest homicide rate in the entire world. In 2015, there were 6,000 homicides for a country with 6 million people. That means 1 in every 1,000 people get murdered. It wasn't uncommon to see dead bodies. Civilians reported feeling scared walking a quarter mile in a densely populated area. So it's kind of like Detroit, actually twice as bad if you can imagine. So in 2019, Nayib Bukele, I might be pronouncing that wrong, is it Bukele or Bukele? My boy Nayib became president with an agenda to combat gang violence. This started with increased security in neighborhoods with high levels of gang influence. Every time there was a crime spike, Nayib would get harsher on the gang members. In April 2020, there was a spike in murders, and in response, prisoners were no longer allowed to make calls because they were ordering murders from behind bars. Rival gang members also had to share cells. The government shared pictures of inmates in harsh conditions too. Murder rates would go down, and the next step was to stop gangs from extorting businesses. MS-13 had control over bus routes in El Salvador, extorting the workers. The government took control of the bus route from MS-13. In response to this, March 25th to March 27th in 2002, there were 87 murders. The murders were mostly senseless, with victims just being regular people. El Salvador declared this a terrorist act. Committing violent acts to inspire political change is terrorism, actually. So a state of emergency was approved. It's supposed to last 30 days, but every 30 days it became reapproved. Anyone who is a gang member is now considered a terrorist. And you can tell they're gang members because they have certain tattoos: 18, 13, the devil horns. So police started creating checkpoints, raiding houses, searching vehicles and backpacks of suspects. If somebody was a suspect, then they would get stripped to see if they had gang tattoos. In the US, there are non-gang members who have gang tattoos because they think it's cool. I wonder if El Salvador is similar. After a month, 17,000 gang members were arrested. They were put into an environment similar to an open office. Bukele put them on a strict diet of 2 meals per day. It was just beans and tortillas. There just wasn't enough, so Bukele announced that he would build a terrorism confinement center with a capacity of 40,000, which opened in January. And before we get to that, the government of El Salvador actually started destroying the gravestones of gang members so they can no longer be glorified. They leave the bodies intact though, but anything with gang symbolism is erased. Now the mega prison, there was a video of Bukele touring it. The prisoners have plenty of space to bang each other. The cells have 80 bunks with no mattresses, 2 toilets, 2 baths that can only be turned on by the guards. And 100 prisoners are assigned to each cell. They have to sleep on hard surfaces or the floor, which the Liver King approves of.
Number one, comfort is not good for the organism. Bring fucking mattresses. You know, that shit's a fucking cast. That shit's horrific for you. You get on the fucking ground, you do that for a while. And
is it bad for you though, or does it just not make you stronger as a person?
Multiple. Yes.
Like it's not bad for you to sleep in a bed.
It's bad.
These guys are gonna be jacked. This shakedown here looks a little gay. They're all in their boxers with their heads lying on each other. They'd probably be kissing if they weren't on camera. Some Bud Light type activity. If someone is out of line, they get put in solitary confinement. There is no light and you're there 24 hours a day. Overall, in the past year, 66,000 gang members have been arrested. El Salvador now has the highest incarceration rate in the world. If you count probation, halfway houses, then the US is still number 1. Our politicians being critical of El Salvador should keep in mind that we arrest a lot of people too, and MS-13 and 18th Street started here before El Salvador. Now, has this been effective? They've been rounding up gang members for over a year, and it looks like the number of homicides have gone down by 56%. People in El Salvador are able to go outside again, and 91% of the population approves of the gang crackdown.
Bueno, pues como allí en Bukele creo que tenemos el presidente número 1 a nivel mundial.
Que está haciendo buen trabajo.
Que hace un buen trabajo? He's doing a good job?
Sí, un excelente trabajo.
An excellent job, okay.
No, mi presidente es cosa seria. Pues quieras o no, nos ha venido como a quitar muchos pesos de encima, digamos, su forma de gobernar. Y como a dejar más tranquilidad, más paz, más... como que se disfruta un poquito más la vida, ¿verdad? Aquí en mi país, y es alguien que Dios ha puesto ahí para ayudar al pueblo.
There is a little backlash. This woman was wondering where her son was. He was the one with the shaved head and the black and white tattoos, so if you guys can spot him. In my opinion, these gang members are pretty brutal. They pride themselves on being as vicious as possible, killing women and children, sex trafficking. There are interviews where they brag about how many people they kill. So I don't feel any sympathy towards them, knowing they're murderers. Long term, I think potential gang members just might stop getting tattoos on their face and be more organized and secretive. As far as other Latin American countries doing the same thing, it wouldn't work in most places because the politicians work with the gangs and get bribed by the cartels. Honduras, for example, their former president got caught sneaking cocaine into the U.S., and his brother was a high-profile drug dealer. The cartels in Mexico are strong enough that if a politician announced a crackdown, then their family would go missing, so I don't think it's going to catch on. I'm predicting Vice, CNN, some goofy news website is going to make a documentary, a hit piece on Bukele, interview a mom whose son is in jail, find one guy who claims to be falsely in prison. He got the 18 tattooed because of Peyton Manning, or the MS tattoo was because he's a fan of MS Paint. Cut to a guy saying that things are still a little dangerous, and that's the whole documentary. Anyway, what do you guys think? I'm out.
Sorry, what you guys doing later, huh? I was just going to hang out, but maybe we could get a pizza or, scam some chicks or something, right? Because, I don't know. I do like the ladies,